It's the end of an era at Amazon. Jeff Bezos wrapping up his last trading day as the CEO of the company founded over 3 decades ago. Let's get to Deirdre Bosa with more on what's next for Amazon.
While it is always day one at Amazon, Monday kicks off a new era. New CEO in Andy Jassy, new guiding principles, and also fresh challenges. Jeff Bezos created some $1.7 trillion in shareholder value over the past 2+ decades through relentless customer obsession and a startup mentality that persisted even as it became one of the biggest companies in the world. Jassy, though, begins his reign with a somewhat softer approach. Empathy and a goal of becoming Earth's best employer, those were added to Amazon's leadership principles yesterday, as the company has more than just customers to obsess over these days. There's its growing workforce, labor activists, regulators, and lawmakers all scrutinizing its size and influence. As always, of course, there are still investors looking for ever more growth at a time when Amazon is facing more competition in the cloud, its profit engine, and e-commerce sales that are set to slow post-pandemic. Bezos is executive chair. He's not going anywhere. He will still be involved in major decisions, but it will fall on Andy Jassy to navigate this new delicate balance. And Jassy, not Bezos, is likely to be the one to face Congress and antitrust pressure, much in the same way that task has fallen on Alphabet's Sundar Pichai when its founders stepped back. There is a general consensus, though, that if anyone can follow Bezos, it is Jassy. He has been there since almost the very beginning. He has pioneered its cloud business. And as for building Amazon's next pillar, well, Bezos hinted just before he left that could be media and entertainment through Amazon Studios. And that task will fall to Andy Jassy. Back over to you.
Interesting. A large task ahead of him for sure. Deirdre, thank you. Andy Jassy set to take the reins as chief executive this Monday, July 5th, the date with significance. Amazon was incorporated on this day 27 years ago. So what can we expect from the Jassy era? Loop Ventures founder Gene Munster joins us now. Hey, Gene.
Hi, Leslie.
So Deirdre laid that all out quite well for us. And as the Wall Street Journal describes it, Andy Jassy is going to be filling some of the biggest shoes in business, coming on the heels of Jeff Bezos in that role. Given how the tech industry is so often characterized by this idea of the cult of the founder and the ability to kind of move fast and break things, I mean, does this change the game for Amazon, or is it already just such a mature company at this point that as long as they can succeed in succession, it will be okay?
It does change, and I think you hit really the pressure point of this whole conversation, which is around culture. And the analogy I go back to is what happened with Apple and Tim Cook and Steve Jobs and that transition. And it was important for Apple to maintain its culture of excellence. And so they created what was Apple University. It is a program where employees can learn about the things that Steve Jobs was passionate about. And so Tim was there not from the start, but was there from the mid-90s, and was a good transition. I think that Andy sets up that culture transition better than anyone else. He has been there almost from the start. He is considered by insiders Amazonian, which is, I think, the highest cultural identification that Jeff Bezos could give someone. And ultimately, I think that that is his biggest challenge. And so then the question is, what is the culture of Amazon? There was that change that Deirdre mentioned around the addition of empathy. I think that that's consistent with Jassy's. He's a little bit more soft-spoken. I think that he is a better listener than Bezos, and so I think that plays into it. But that's not really the center of the culture. The culture is, you talked about, move fast and break things. Amazon's culture is about innovation, and we can talk about the areas that they need to continue to innovate in. And I suspect that that roadmap is in place, and my bet is that he's going to be successful at extending the company's winning over the last decade, 2 decades.
Okay, well, what are those areas of innovation that they need to work on?
So I think it starts with fulfillment, which might surprise some people because it doesn't seem very glamorous. But when you think about what has really propelled Amazon, it's been partially the marketplace, but also just the speed that they get their products to people. And the fulfillment question over the next decade is going to be beyond fulfillment centers, which they've done a good job of building over the last 5 to 10 years. It's going to be about replacing machines, humans with machines, and not just in fulfillment centers, but also in final delivery. They have a project going on that is doing that to the home. So I think fulfillment's one big area. Another obvious one, given Jassie's background, is AWS. About 20% of computing globally is done on the cloud. That number in a decade is 30% plus. And a last big area, and I'm staying out of the content because I think I'm not as optimistic that that's going to be a game changer for Amazon. But I think the last big area that will be a changer is what's going to happen in brick and mortar. And obviously, we've taken a step away from brick and mortar over the last year. I think people will slowly re-engage there. And if you look at the track record of brick and mortar over the last decade, the most compelling consumer experience has been Drive Up, which has been really the result of the past year. But Amazon has an opportunity with these Go stores really to change the way that things are inventoried in stores, and the friction that you have, make it essentially frictionless going in and out of the store. So I see those three, fulfillment, AWS, and what they will do at brick and mortar, as juicy opportunities for Jassy in the next decade.
As you think about succession in tech and the timing of this transition in particular, do you think that Bezos is bequeathing a CEO role for a company that's in good shape to fulfill, no pun intended, those various innovation pillars that you laid out? Or is it going to be more of an uphill battle, given the face of regulation, given the face of competition, for Amazon to really get where it needs to be, especially in investors' minds?
Well, I'll add another piece that is, we talked about the roadmap. Another important piece that Bezos has laid the groundwork is educating investors about how to treat them when they go into investment mode and not to penalize their market cap. And so I do think that the company's in a good position because I think that they can go into multi-year investment phases and not necessarily hurt retention with the stock going down. So I think that that is very important. You talked about the competitive piece. I think I don't want to largely dismiss the competition. I would say that if you and I were going to start a business today and we were given $25 billion to compete with Amazon, I'd promptly return the money to the investors. And so I'm not as concerned about the competition, but I think that around legislation, regulation, I think that obviously is an unknown, and I think it is a small impact about their fair dealings with their third-party sellers. That's kind of at the center of the bullseye of regulators. But that is something we're going to hear a lot more about in the years to come regarding Amazon.
Your comment about returning that $20 million to create a company to compete with Amazon, and you returning that because there's no way to compete with Amazon, is a clip that I think regulators are going to be using when they talk about the anti-competition involved. But we really appreciate your commentary, Gene. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a nice weekend.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.